And Mr. Dewsberry, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for telling your story and allowing us to tell your story. So this is going to be fun.
I didn't have much choice.
I'm sure. I'm sure. But so could you tell me, you said that you were home on leave in 1952. Is that in Chicago?
Yes.
Yes. So can you talk to me about what it was like around Christmas and New Year's in Chicago in 1952? What was the mood? I know that there was a war going on, and what was it like for you?
What was going on? I was in college, and of course, it was very evident that that was going on. People were leaving school, or dropping out, or getting drafted, or whatnot. But arrangements had been made with the selective service that those of us in engineering school had a separate category, had to keep their hands off us as long as we continued with our education.
Okay.
So when I finally graduated after 5 years in a special co-op program, it only took selective service about two months to find me and call me.
So you were drafted.
So I was drafted.
Okay.
Frankly, I waited to be drafted. Actually, after I graduated, I went back to work. My education involved alternate work in its school periods, and I spent at a plant of International Harvester. And I went back working with them as a design engineer full time, but that didn't last long because that call.
Yeah. And so how long were you in the military before you met June?
Well, would have been more than a year, because I started out basic training, infantry training in Kentucky, and while I was there, I applied for officer candidate school. I figured as a college graduate, I could do more than it looked like having privates do.
Yeah.
So I finally sent me to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland.
Okay.
Which is where the Ordnance Armored School was. And I graduated from there and came home with a 2-week leave before going back for more training. And I met June during that period. My folks set up a dinner in their house and invited my various friends from the church and college and so forth. And one of those was June's sister-in-law. So she dragged June to this meeting. June, by this time, had finished her nurse's training and was back at Elmhurst College to get her degree. And she was also working as a nurse. And the last thing she wanted to do was to spend a night of her free time meeting these strange people. So we actually met at my parents' house. And the next day, I was driving, and by this time I had a nice brand new black and yellow Bel Air convertible. Well, it wasn't a convertible, but it was Bel Air, Chevy Bel Air. And I saw her walking back to the campus. My house, my folks' home, was near the campus. So I saw her walking back. So I generated a rather interesting traffic pattern so that I could come casually up alongside her and offer her a ride back to the campus. And from that, we got well acquainted, and I was home for most of the rest of the time. And then I went back to Aberdeen for more training, and we communicated and exchanged pictures and that kind of stuff. And then received orders to go to the Far East Command at the end of the year. So actually I came home again the week before Christmas on my way overseas. And so June came over and helped me dress the Christmas tree my folks had. And we had some dates. And on New Year's Eve, we were together, and I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, which she accepted too, pointing out that I was going to be going overseas. But I made the rash remark that if somehow I got stationed in Japan or something, I'd send for her and we could get married there, figuring that was rather unlikely. And I flew from there, my first airplane flight, to Seattle to wait for the boat to take me overseas.
And I interrupt you for a moment. I have a few more questions just about this period. So how did you know that June was the right girl for you?
I don't know. I had dated other girls, but this just seemed the right one.
Right. Did you have like a favorite song or a pet name or anything like that? Any kind of details about that you're willing to share?
No, not really.
No. Okay.
On the ship, I wrote her a letter every day, but of course it took over 2 weeks before I could mail them.
What did you write about in these letters?
I really don't remember.
Yeah. Do you know if did she keep the letters? Do they still exist, or did you ever see them?
By the time we had children, she got rid of them.
No room.
Must have been afraid they'd start looking at them.
Yeah. I'd love to know about this decision to ask her to marry you when you both knew that you were going overseas.
Right.
And yeah, so like what did you and June talk about the fact that you were going to get married, but there was this possibility that perhaps something could happen?
We had somewhat different backgrounds. Of course, June had grown up in India as a missionary student, had all her schooling up through high school in India. And so she was, sort of a different person. And I guess I was always sort of a little lonely, not lonely, but different than a lot of people. And we just clicked together.
So she had traveled more than you had before you went overseas.
Yes.
I see. Oh, that's interesting.
My traveling prior to going over to Japan consisted of driving from Elmhurst, Illinois to the various army posts and vacation travels with my parents, but I'd never been out of the country.
Now, so the decision not to get married while you were home on leave, can you talk about that? Like, what was your plan? Like, what was your plan together, assuming that you were going to go off?
There's no way to do that because there wouldn't have been time to do it.
Really? Okay.
Because I came home on leave. I had, I think, 2 weeks leave by the time I had to be in Japan, in Seattle, to get the boat. And there wouldn't have been time. That wouldn't have made sense.
Yeah.
So the approach was to agree to get married at some future time.
Right. Yeah.
But I did say that if I got stationed in Japan, I'd send for her.
But your plan originally, though, was you'll go off to wherever and you'd come home and then you'd marry and start a family. Right. That was the plan. Right. Right. And so
when I got to Japan, they plucked me out of the pipeline.
Yeah.
And assigned me to the headquarters of the Far East Command. I turned out to be, I think, the only second lieutenant in the Far East Command headquarters. They needed an officer for this maintenance team that was going to travel to air bases to do maintenance work on anti-aircraft guns. And there were civilians, tech reps that were on the team, and Army personnel. And they needed an officer. And
That was you.
Enough of an officer that I qualified. Of course, I had an engineering degree. I was a college graduate. I guess my record, I was a top graduate of the officer candidate school. So they didn't wait very long. As soon as the ship arrived in Japan, I got the word to go on to the headquarters in Yokohama. And they immediately assigned me a barracks in a Leahy barracks, which was a Quonset hut.
Did you know that when you got that assignment, did that feel to you like, oh, this means I don't have to go fight in Korea? I mean, was that something that you were cognizant of at the time, like, or was this just sort of like you thought this might just be temporary? Or
I made the assumption that this assignment meant I was going to be based in and out of Japan, because the air bases were not in Tokyo. Two of them were near Tokyo. One was in northern Japan and one was in Okinawa. And I would travel to them all.
yeah. At what point did you either write June to let her know that you were going to be stationed in Japan?
I think I phoned her.
Okay.
From Yokohama.
Yeah, was that difficult to make a phone call overseas in 1953?
That's right. This was possible. You had to book it in advance.
Yeah.
And go to the particular telephone center. And I made the call, and it turned out that I tried calling her. She was by that time working at St. Luke's Hospital in Chicago, living in the dormitory, but she was spending that weekend visiting my folks. So when the call got to her, she wasn't there, which left me a little irritated.
I'm sure.
We got over that hump. And so I arranged while I was in Yokohama, I went to the offices of American President Lines and booked her a cruise from San Francisco to Yokohama. So I always told her that she was going to have her honeymoon, but without the burden of a husband.
I like that. Before that, did June write to you? Were you still corresponding while you were in Japan?
Well, on the ship, I wrote every day, but I couldn't mail them until I got to Japan. And she had left a lot of letters for me. And so while we were apart, we pretty much wrote every day.
And do you remember anything about those letters, or not anything specific, or that she might have written about to you?
Well, all I know is that June threw them all out before the kids could find them.
But I want to just focus on this phone call when you finally reached June back home, and you told her that you were going to be stationed in Japan and you wanted her to come and be with you. What was her reaction like? Was she thrilled? Was she? I mean, obviously, I would have assumed she might have been nervous about traveling. But now that I learned that she was already someone who traveled a lot,
traveled from Japan from India to the States at least 3 times before she was 15. The last time she was traveling alone.
Really?
So wow. Mother in the least to think of going to Japan.
So was she excited to come? Like she was eager to leave Chicago and come to Japan to be with you?
I gathered she was.
Yes.
But she did. And so I managed to be at the dock when the ship docked. And she had a room at the New Grand Hotel in Yokohama, which was where MacArthur stayed the first day he was in Japan. And she had some things to go through because the Army was a little loath to let local natives marry GIs. So we had to go through all the interviews and whatnot, and she passed and I passed. And so within
it must have been it must have been nice to see her again when the last time you saw her, you weren't sure if you would ever see her again. I mean, I would imagine.
Well, that would have been a possibility. But
Yeah.
there she was. First on the sight I saw her was on the deck of the SS President Wilson after
Great.
her honeymoon tour.
The honeymoon without you?
Then we had arranged a wedding at the Yokohama Officers Club, where we had a grand total of 7 people.
I'm really interested in Mr. Dewsberry I think this is sort of a universal thing, especially right now where there's a war in Ukraine and with the pandemic and everything. How do you plan a future together? And when you asked June to marry you and you were going to plan your future together, how do you do that when there is so much unknown?
I guess just with a lot of hope, confidence in yourself, and see what happens.
This idea that you're making a commitment to someone and she's making a commitment to you, knowing that you're going off to a very dangerous place and that you may not come home, and that's always a possibility. And most people not in a wartime, you make a plan for the future, and of course things get in the way.
Well, we wasn't thinking about that. Obviously, I was going to come back.
Do you think that's because you were in love? Is that something, or is it just that you're a very confident optimist?
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it.
When you mentioned that you had gone to dances with June back, like when you were home visiting and you started to date, what kind of dances, like music, what kind of music was played at those dances that you would dance to?
Well, our first date, I got in my car and we went to a place where like high school people went for dancing, and it was closed. So we got back up into Chicago and went to the Aragon Ballroom, which was a big thing in North Chicago, on over 40 night.
So you were the youngest people there.
Yeah. So that was, they let us in anyway.
And what was that, like swing music or?
Well, what kind of music did they play for over 40 people?
Yeah, well, back in 1952, I would imagine it was probably, music of the jazz age, right? The 30s, the 40s.
It was the same type of stuff they played at high school dances. I did eventually get to Korea.
Oh.
A number of years later, I was part of a team of experts meeting with Daewoo Motors on redesign of engines and their new car program. I was there for a week.
So you made it to Korea after all.
And got to Incheon, which was where MacArthur's landing had been made, but the company had a factory there, and I visited there. So I actually saw a little bit of Korea, but like 30 years later.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Mr. Dewsberry, for sharing your story, and letting me, probe you with questions about your life from so long ago. I hope Ron and I can do your story justice.
Yeah, it's always interesting to talk to somebody about my past if they're interested in it. If they're not
Thank you.
interested, I don't pester them about it.